There's two things you need to know about the British economy. The first is that governments have borrowed money, and there's an £800 billion national debt. But the second is that Britain became very rich. There's a lot of private wealth, and the bulk of that is with the top 10%. Remember the bonuses? Well, a lot of those went on houses like these. So the richest 6 million people have got £4,000 billion in private wealth. That's £4 million per household. It's mostly in property, pensions, jewellery, antiques, things like that. Now, just 1/5 of that would pay off the whole national debt. So what I propose is a one-off tax on the wealthiest. And the beauty of the plan is they don't have to pay the tax straight away. They can pay it when they die, and in the meantime, just pay the interest on what they owe. As long as it goes off the government books, then there's no need for the cuts in education, policing, and all the rest of it. The unemployment goes down, and the economy keeps growing. And this scheme would be really popular. We tested it with a YouGov poll, and 74% of the population wanted it. Only 10% were against, and the rich were slightly more in favour than the poor. So let's do it.
And Greg Philo is with us now, and it's a good thing too, because already while we were watching your film, there were furious questions going to and fro the table. So let's be very clear about this. It's not a death tax. It is a one-off tax that you can pay after you die or when you're alive.
Yes, and the whole point about it is that as long as the richest 10% take liability for a small part of the liability each for the government debt, then there is no government debt anymore. You actually wipe off the national debt, and that necessarily takes the deficit down. So there's a hugely powerful moral case for this. That's why I think we got 74% of the population wanting it.
Yeah, I mean, you seem like a nice chap, but isn't this really cloud cuckoo? I mean, you're talking about the sector of society that is the best...
Thanks very much. I'm a professor at Glasgow University. I think the cloud cuckoo land, excuse me saying, is coming from you lot, from the politicians. You actually think...
Not Professor of Economics.
You actually... I do a lot of work in economics, the Economic and Social Research Council. The cloud cuckoo land is the politicians.
But I think the point I'm making is that these are the people who are the best at avoiding tax. You're talking about the segments of society who employ very good accountants.
I'm just saying that people are good at avoiding legal rules. I mean, that's not acceptable if you're talking about avoidance or evasion. But, I mean, people have to obey the law and they have to pay tax. I don't think it's acceptable that the current crisis is being paid for by the people who can least pay, and nor do the bulk of the population. It really is the politicians who are in cloud cuckoo land.
OK, I mean, you're talking about... It's quite interesting to know who these 6 million are, though. I mean, you're making it sound as if they are the super-rich, prawn cocktail-eating Old Trafford crowd that Nick hangs out with normally. But, I mean, are you talking about people, say, with houses that might be worth £700,000?
No, no. I mean, the cut... We did this very carefully with government statisticians. We didn't sort of make it up on the bus. I mean, we went through this very, very carefully with senior civil servants and statisticians and economists. So the cut-off point is around about £1 million. But we also said it should be graduated, so people at the bottom of the 10% wouldn't pay such a high percentage or anything like it, while as it went up, you'd pay more. But what bothers me in all of this is not the obvious, sensible nature of this plan, but the fact it's not being debated. That all we're being offered in programme after programme is, what kind of cuts do you want? You know, do you want this kind of cut? Do you want that kind of cut? BBC had a website saying, pick your cut. You know, this is propaganda.
Let's debate it now. But Grant Shapps is listening to all this. It is simple, and sometimes the most beautiful solutions are very simple. Live on TV, would you like to embrace this idea?
It was simple. It was sparking a lot of questions from us during the film. Just to try to clarify, we need to look at it in more detail. All ideas welcome. I think there is an issue, though, here, Greg, which I think would be somewhat hidden by your plan, which is that the key thing now is to actually get control of public spending and not just find another way of raising taxes somewhere else, but actually to deal with the reason why we're overspending as a nation, as a proportion of, you know, what we produce as a nation. And we need to tackle that as well as finding ways to raise the money.
I mean, it's just
your plan needs.
But that's about stimulating. Can I just reply to that? That's
Yeah.
about stimulating research. That's about stimulating new technology. That's about developing an absolutely superb research sector in universities. And for that, you need to spend money.
Sure,
But what I'm saying is, take money that is currently trapped in the upper reaches of the housing market, which is doing no good to anybody, which is equity. Move a portion of that back into the development of the economy through this new tax.
That sounds suspiciously like a death tax. I know you were saying, whilst we were watching the film, it wasn't one, but it doesn't remove the key point that what you need to do first is cut the inefficiency out of the economy, the waste.
What inefficiency? I mean, I think if you get if you get a really good research sector, I'm not saying we should have waste. Obviously, everybody wants to cut waste, everybody wants to cut inefficiency, but we need to put money into research.
Let me bring
Yvette
Cooper's listening to this in between. I mean, this is something actually that you would love to do if you were given free rein. It sounds right up your street, doesn't it? Tax the rich.
I don't know, obviously, how practical this particular proposal is. I do think it is right that you have to look at taxes as well as at spending in bringing the deficit down, and also at the growth and getting the economy to grow to generate more resources as well. I also think that taxes have got to be progressive, which is why I think we were right to bring in the new top rate of tax. And there have been, you know, other proposals being put forward. I think David Miliband has talked about different forms of a mansion tax or wealth tax. I can't remember the details of that. And obviously Ed Balls has talked about being able to apply the top rate of tax at a slightly lower level. There are different kinds of ways in which you can do this. I think the principle is you should look at tax as well as at spending and not just have this obsession that the government seems to have with shrinking the state to the tiniest possible size you can possibly get away with.
That is what really, I'm agreeing with that. That is exactly, this is traditional Conservative politics under a kind of smoke screen of what we need to do is to cut the state. But leaving that aside, the crucial point is that nobody is discussing how much wealth there is in the country. In a society that has £9 trillion of private wealth, we're worrying about a debt of 800 billion.
Well, let Grant Shapps come back on that.
Well, the debt is going to be about 1.4 trillion, by the way, so it's actually not an insubstantial amount. It's actually pretty large.
If you pay it off.
Well, secondly, we think that higher taxes, unfortunately, are a part of this. It's not, as you're caricaturing, nothing to do with raising taxes, but we think it should be about 80% to do with cutting budgets and 20% of raising taxes to make this work. Your argument is, actually, let's not bother to cut budgets. Let's not take the inefficiency out of the system. Instead, let's just raise 100%.
Budgets, you'll increase unemployment, as everybody says. Everybody knows you'll increase. Then you'll have to pay all the welfare.
Wait a second. I just don't accept that's right. I mean, if you look at if you look at the way that governments run, and I look at my own department, we have Parisian sofas purchased by previous ministers in our department at the cost of tens and hundreds of thousands of pounds. That kind of waste we need to get rid of.
The Independent Office of Budget Responsibility said that the consequence of the budget measures that were introduced would be to have 100,000 fewer jobs in the economy, 100,000 more people.
We're running out of time, but I want to get the last word.
That's not what they said. They said cuts in private sector as well as
I mean, the question is this. I mean, it's an interesting psychological thing, but when you talk to people, even if they're not even in that wealth bracket, about an inheritance tax or a tax that they may be able to pay after death, even if they're not in that wealth tax, they inherently don't like it. They don't like the sound of it. I mean, things like a mansion tax, they don't like the noise of it.
Why would 74% vote for it? Only 10% were against. We explained it very carefully in the YouGov poll. What I would say, all of this is on the Glasgow Media Group website. People can go and see all the questions we asked, all the figures. If you go to the Glasgow Media Group website, they can read it all. And next time people see a debate like this where they say there's no alternative, go there, phone up the BBC and say, yes, there's an alternative. Look, it's all on the website here. This is what the population want. Let's go for that.
Thank you very much for coming in. Very sparky debate, Professor Philo.